Welcome to the Angel's Brief, the podcast series. We bring together the smartest minds in angel investing and ambitious startup founders to share their stories, insights, experience, and much more. The host for today's episode is Duran York, the CEO of Cityside Ventures and the co-founder of Birmingham Angels. So let's get to it.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Somer. Happy 2025. It's the first year that we actually back in business in 2025. There's a lot of buzz going around this year going to be a better year than we had the last year and maybe two. So welcome. You're our first guest on the podcast series we're starting this year. The title of the podcast is What the Buzz. We are collecting different buzz, that we hear about startup in relationship to early stage investing. And one of the buzz that we hear in the last 6 months, particularly, is women's health, and more money is going to pour into women's health. And we decided to invite you to the first episode of 2025. The title of this particular session is Women's Health, Why Now? And I'm going to let you introduce yourself and kind of 60-second background, your name, company.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm always excited to talk about women's health, just ask anyone. Um, but by way of introduction, my name is Somer Baburek, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hera Biotech. Hera Biotech is a women's health company focused on addressing the gaps in diagnostic technologies available for many of the diseases that specifically or uniquely impact women. My background is business. So, my undergrad is in entrepreneurship, my master's is focused in data analytics. I worked in life science venture capital for 10 years prior to becoming a founder. I worked primarily doing diligence on companies seeking funding. We were an early stage investor. We did diagnostics devices and therapeutics. And I served on the board of some of our companies and served in an operational capacity in a couple of drug development companies. Those companies were exited, and I decided I really wanted to get back into women's health. I fell in love with women's health in my undergrad, where I developed a device around my labor and delivery with my first daughter. And I now have three daughters. So I am three times as motivated to make some changes to the status quo in women's health.
Very, very good. So, as I said, I mean, we designed this podcast to bring people from the industry that what we call spending their time in the trenches every day and in the front line of the particular industry, and make the correlation between this and have it be insightful for investors that looking to put money in women's health. Okay.
Sure.
Um, so let me see. So my name is Duran York. I'm one of the founder. I'm the CEO of Cityside Venture, which is an early stage venture group here in Birmingham, but I'm also the co-founder of Birmingham Angels, which is a syndicate of angel investors here in Oakland County. We have a lot of close to about 80 members, all wealthy individuals, Oakland County, looking for the right opportunity. And we are looking to expand this year and do a lot of provide a lot of value to the investor in the form of education and frontline information, as I call it. So the first question is, of course, why women health and why now?
Well, law of numbers, we're 51% of the population. And all of us at some point in our life will interact with the healthcare system. So it's an extremely large market, and I would say growing actually. And I think that why now is, you know, there's been a lot of changes over the last, let's say, 30 years. Um, and those changes are in a lot of different places. So when you think about in my particular world, which is life sciences, and women's health spans more than that, right? You have opportunities on the wellness side, on the direct to consumer or over the counter. When you talk about hard science innovations, so therapeutics, diagnostics, devices, and things like that. So there's an entire gamut of opportunities depending on what your interest and comfort level is. But when you start thinking about the hard science side, only in the past, 20 years or 30 years was it required that women be included in clinical trials. So when you have fundamental barriers where you just simply don't know anything about the female body, and then all of a sudden a legislative change happens or a regulatory change happens that forces you to learn about their body, whether you want to or not, then you start to have opportunity because with knowledge becomes innovation and opportunity. So I think why now is because we're finally prioritizing this. Women have found places of leadership and power, and they're letting their voices be heard for problems or hurdles that they experience with their health every day. And rising tides raise all ships. So as that voice gets louder and louder, and more people join in, then you start to recognize there are huge opportunities and gaps that women have been facing for years. And so I think that's why now.
Okay, that's a pretty comprehensive answer. So, you know, is this being said that with relate to women's health, there were less solution or less innovation in the space of women's health in the last, I don't know, 20 some years uh, than happened in the last few years?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's actually quite accurate. So I think that, when you hear women's health, a lot of times a term that gets thrown around or conflated with women's health is the term femtech. Um, and so, I think you have to address both terms. So when I think about femtech, I think about products and services that enable females to live their life easier. So I think the easiest example of something like that is a period tracking app. So when you talk about innovation within the last few years versus the last 20 years, you weren't even like allowed to say period in public when I was little, it was like you just, put your hand over
Right,
your mouth and you kind of whispered about it. And now that's not the case. We talk about period products and we talk about, and these aren't all relegated to feminine hygiene, which is a terrible term.
right.
And so I think just that level of conversation spurs people to get interested and spurs development in the space. So when you think about femtech, think about it as kind of the first wave of acknowledgement that there was an opportunity in women's health. And so you saw this slew of products, all direct to consumer. And I think kind of the thought there was A, this is low hanging fruit. And B, this population or patient population, if you will, has kind of been left out of the healthcare conversation. So we can develop a product to suit a need and solve a problem that she has that's completely being ignored in the
I know. I mean,
formal
I
sense.
heard. I mean, no. It's funny. I heard that they say in commerce in general, they say women are much
Hmm.
stronger buying power than men. And
Hmm.
it's funny. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, a doctor, a couple of days ago. That he's a gynecologist, by the way. That he's saying that women are going to spend a lot more about their health and more conscious about their health than men.
Yep.
So if he said, if I have to choose, do I want my practice to be 100% women versus 100% men? I'll choose women because women will be more proactive about their health and will willing to spend more money on their health than men is a little bit less conscious to this. Is there any truth in that statement?
I think so. And if I might be a little bit cheeky with it, this is why married men live longer because we prioritize your
That's
health,
good.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
I know my poor husband is long suffering of you need to get your eyes checked. You have to go for your exam,
Yeah.
your wellness
Yeah.
checkup. And he's like, oh my gosh, whatever, just I'll go. I'm going now. So yes, there is truth. And it's even larger than that when you think about the economic implication. So women make about 80% of all healthcare spending decisions. That's huge.
Right.
But on the other side of that coin, women are 75% of the healthcare workforce. So when you think about the health of that population, it affects us twofold from an economic standpoint. One on the buy side, but one on the side of availability. And we know healthcare workers and things like this, we have shortages. Well, if we're not prioritizing the health of 75% of that workforce, those are only going to get worse. So, there is kind of this, we've kind of reached this crescendo of holy cow, we've got all these women in the workplace. They're doing all of these caregiving jobs. They're making all of these purchasing decisions, and we don't know how to keep them healthy. And so I think it's a big problem, and I'm excited to see the attention there.
Well, that's great. So here's kind of like a question with two sides to it, right? Is this better for women to lead the women's health tech or men?
That's a loaded question.
No, I know. I'm not
Yeah,
asking it from a gender perspective, like
sure.
who's better, but is women health? If I'm an investor, I'm investing in tech, a medical tech company, uh, focusing on women's health. Is women's going to have more understanding in finding the right solution than men that leading? Because we got approached by certain companies that in a med tech space that are for women, so, health, but
Mhm.
leading by men, and we start questioning: is this
So unequivocally, women are going to understand the problem better, right? Um, and that doesn't. It's not. It is a gender issue, but it's not a gender issue. Like if you
right?
just think about the principles of organizational behavior or business, those who are closest to the problem are usually best suited to solve it.
Right.
So I pause because there are those out there who are in the femtech space or women's health space or whatever who are banging the drum and welcome to the she woman man haters club, and I am not part of that club. I think we need all people at the table to improve every aspect of women's health. That said, in designing a solution, in identifying a problem and understanding that problem to the depths and with the nuances required for this market, I do think that, it's a red flag for me if there's no women in the decision making positions.
I got you.
Because how do you know? And I think the easiest way to think about it is, and I don't mean this in a crass way, I can't understand prostate cancer. I can't understand erectile dysfunction and the true burden of that as a woman. I may be able to sympathize, but I can't empathize.
Mm,
And that's critical when you're talking about designing solutions.
I got it. Now we're going to shift into more the investors fundraising space. It's clear what we hear from various women founders that women sometimes have more challenge raising capital than
Mhm.
men, which for me it's a little bit of a puzzle, even as
Mhm.
an investor. But I'm married happily for 40 years. You know,
Congratulations.
thank you. You know what they say, that the first 20 years of marriage, you're looking for all the faults in the other person and emphasize that. But after 40 years of marriage, all the faults become endearing qualities, right?
I'll
So
remember that.
yeah, so in many ways, what I'm saying is that although if we look, we actually did analysis in our portfolio, the women's founders perform much better than the male founders,
Mhm.
but yet there is a difficult for female to raise capital.
Mhm.
From a founder perspective, why it is the way it is in your view?
So I talk about this a lot, and excuse my science terminology, but I think it's an epigenetic problem. So I
I
think
got
there's
no,
multiple
no
reasons.
disagreement here, but I'm just
Yeah. So I think it's twofold, right? So predominantly investors are male. There are high net worth women who predominantly feel more comfortable doing philanthropy. And
okay.
so that balance just ends up that predominantly investors are male. So when you think about a women's health solution, it's specific to women's health is how I'm gonna phrase it, because I can't speak to female founders in other spaces who still struggle, but I don't think as much as those in women's health. Um, and the reason is I have to spend such a huge portion of my time with the investor explaining the problem and
I got it.
convincing you that it's a problem, that I don't get to spend as much time talking to you about the business opportunity because you're having trouble believing the problem is a problem.
And I can
Um,
understand as a male, you probably go like too much information. I don't want to know more than that
right,
kind of thing.
right.
I
Or
get
they're
it.
like, yeah, but is it that big of a deal?
Right,
I mean,
right.
it is, and I can't tell you how many times I've been at, like, endometriosis is now starting to kind of come into the limelight. But for a long time, I would say the word endometriosis, and they would be like, "Well, I'm going to ask my wife if they've ever heard of that." And I'm like, "Well, for her sake, I hope
I,
she
I
hasn't."
I'll give you an antidote, but it's kind of supporting what you're saying. So we invested in a company called Huranex. It's a company that started by a very famous urologist here in Michigan, and they wanted to create a product that people can do the urine test at home instead of coming to the clinic, right?
Hmm.
So he said many patients come to the clinic, spend 3 hours sitting and waiting to take the urine test. And so they invented a product that you can take the urine test at home. You put the strip, it gives you the colors. You can take a picture, send it to the doctor, so he can give you the telemedicine, reading the thing instead of dragging you to the clinic. But one of the nurse assistant that worked for this doctor came to him as they working on the product and say, "Hey, women don't like to take the urine test because it's not as efficient as male. So can we solve the problem?" And they'll kind of look at her like, "What do you mean?" Right? So here's what they did. The cup that they're using for the urine test, they invented like a handle that you put the cup in and you can hold it when you take the urine test.
Hmm.
This was the one thing that make the product go from
Yep.
from from zero to hero.
Hmm.
I brought it home, I showed it to my wife, she go, "Holy mackerel, it's like about time somebody will solve the problem."
Right.
So so that's what I'm saying, that we need more women involved in the innovation process, especially when
Right.
it's come to women's health. But it's not only limited to women's health, right? They can
Right.
also provide a perspective for other things. So I'm completely with you. I mean,
Yes.
it's the thing. So no, I know you're in a biotech, space, and specifically what but from your touring the country and being in all the conferences and all the places, what is when it's come to women's health, what is hot and what is not? So if I'm as an investor, what do you recommend me to focus on that's going to
Sure.
be the biggest amount of innovation in the next, I don't know, 10 years?
Sure. So if I put my Oracle hat on, and use my third eye to see, no, honestly, so I think this is probably an unpopular opinion. I think heavy priority on direct to consumer is dead because, and I say this all the time, you cannot cut the medical profession out of it. That's not the solution. And I think so many of these products were undertaken with the idea of don't even need the doctor. And it's like, but you do, like if it's an actual disease, you do. So I don't think cutting out stakeholders in the space is any longer an option, right? So I think that the direct to consumer app stuff is going to be incremental changes. It's going to be Me Too products or add on products. I think the next wave in the women's health space is addressing chronic, life stage specific, um, and gender specific diseases, right? So I think it's going to be the more hard science focus. So right now, you hear hot, menopause, 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 menopause. Halle Berry's doing it. All the celebrities are doing it because they're all aging and they're all having hot flashes, and that's miserable. So menopause remains super hot. Endometriosis is certainly hitting the limelight now. And then from endometriosis, you get a watershed effect of other chronic diseases like endometrial cancer, adenomyosis, all of those kinds of things. And then I think the next segment that you see really popular is aging, and that's beyond just cosmetic aging issues. That's ovarian aging and reproductive aging, and how that actually physically affects the body. So I think the days of super easy to understand, slap it on the app store, get your traction, what's your CAC, and then we're great is probably not going to be as hot in women's health anymore. I think investors are going to have to get really smart on science-based solutions and understanding those scientific rationales, or surrounding yourself with people who can help you evaluate those, of which there are plenty. And so I think that's going to be kind of your next big win for women's health.
Okay, we appreciate that. So the last question before we close, I want to ask you. So if you're sitting in, you're putting the founder's hat,
Mhm.
and what advice, feedback, or I don't know, insight you want to give us as an investors that we should pay attention to or take into consideration as we dealing with women's health and especially female founders? Like what do
Sure.
you would like us to change?
Sure. So I think that one thing that is very nuanced, and I've seen it over and over again, and I have a bit of a unique perspective because I used to sit on the VC side.
Right.
Now I sit on the founder side. Female founders tend to be conservative with all of their projections, be it financial, be it adoption. Any projection that she makes is conservative. It's not even realistic, it's conservative. So, as a VC, what we used to do is we'd look at the projections that the founder gave us, whack them in half, and say, okay, if we get half of that, are we still happy with it? Don't do that to your female founders because it's going to look skewed, right?
Got it.
And so I think that you can take um, my advice would be to take whatever she says as absolutely realistic and attainable. And if you want to be bullish, it's probably pretty conservative. Um, Ask her questions about like promotional questions, like what happens if you get more adoption? How do you scale? Because those are the things that she's going to need to have thought about. And she maybe hasn't thought about them because she's so focused on absolutely what she can promise. Um, and then I think that, we see a lot of things about female founders performing better and giving ROI. I had a statistician talk to me about that and said, yeah, but do you know why the ROI on female founders is so bad or so good? And I said, because they perform better. And she said, no, it's because they get beat up on valuation. So, um, and it's your job, right? As an investor, your job is to get the best deal that you possibly can. But always try to think about it in the sense of if this was a guy sitting here telling me this about a software, or if this was a guy, he'd have a $40 million valuation and she's asking for 10, and I don't think that's unrealistic. So I would just say to keep an open mind. And appreciate that you are going to get better returns. They do tend to operate more efficiently and they tend to be far more creative in pivots and how to keep the company afloat rather than just dilution, dilution, dilution.
No, I appreciate it. So, as I said, it's the name of the podcast is what the buzz, and we know there's a buzz about women health, and we are our type is to synthesize it to our investor to for them to understand, what to take away from this conversation. Pay more attention to the female founders. Leave your ego at the door. Trust me, after 4 years of marriage, my ego is already at the door. Leave at the door. Listen to them not as a female or male, as a human being that have something in front of them, and then you know agree that women have the tendency to be more conservative. We already noticed that,
Mhm.
so we'll take it up, definitely on consideration to look at it in a different light. But we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We are excited about what's Hera Biotech is going to do in 2025.
Thank
Anything we
you.
can help, and we wish that 2025 is going to be the breakthrough year.
Me too. Me too.
Thanks, Summer. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Are you interested in becoming a member and joining our group? Please contact Jerron York by phone 248 981 6688 or visit our members' website by using the following QR code. We are looking forward to talking to you soon.